The sun had barely risen, casting a golden hue across the quiet town square. On this Memorial Day, townsfolk gathered to pay their respects, lining the streets with flags and wreaths. Among them stood a lone figure, his silhouette stark against the brightness of the morning light. It was Cal, a retired Marine in his late 50s, known for his stoic demeanor and deep commitment to honoring his fallen brothers in arms. Cal had suffered significant injuries during his service, including a leg wound that still troubled him to this day. Yet there he was, dressed immaculately in his Marine blues, his chest adorned with medals that told stories of courage, sacrifice, and resilience. He stood at attention, saluting toward the horizon where the flag fluttered proudly in the breeze. This wasn't just a ceremonial salute. For Cal, it was personal, a tribute to Ben, his twin brother, who had made the ultimate sacrifice during their final deployment together. The memory of that day was seared into Cal's mind, the sound of gunfire, the chaos of the battlefield, and the moment Ben shielded him from a fatal blast. Ben's last words, "Take care of them, Cal," echoed in his ears every time he thought of that moment. Cal hadn't missed a single Memorial Day since his return home. Each year, he held a salute for hours, a silent vigil that spoke louder than words. The townsfolk admired his dedication, but this year was different. The heat was merciless, and whispers of concern rippled through the crowd. "Doesn't he need a break?" a young woman named Tess murmured to her friend as she adjusted her phone to live stream the event. "I've seen him do this every year, an older man," Ed replied. "But this heat, it's worse than usual." Despite the murmurs, Cal remained steadfast. His gaze never wavered, his posture never faltered, even as beads of sweat trickled down his temple. His thoughts were a mix of pride and sorrow, replaying memories of Ben and the brothers they had lost together. By the second hour, the crowd grew restless. A few people had left, unable to bear the rising heat. Tess's livestream picked up comments from viewers across the country. Some applauded Cal's dedication, while others questioned the wisdom of such a strenuous act. "Why doesn't someone step in?" one commenter wrote. "He's so inspiring," said another. "This is what true devotion looks like. I'm proud." As the clock ticked closer to the third hour, Cal's body began to betray him. His injured leg trembled slightly, a signal of the strain had endured. A few concerned onlookers started murmuring louder. "Someone should help him," Ed said, his voice tinged with worry. "He's been through enough. He doesn't have to prove anything." But California wasn't doing this to prove anything. To him, this was a promise to Ben and every Marine who had fallen. It wasn't about the pain or the heat. It was about keeping their memory alive, ensuring their sacrifices weren't forgotten. As the third hour approached, a distant rumble disrupted the uneasy murmurs. The sound grew louder, sharper, unmistakable, the roar of motorcycles. Heads turned toward the street as a group of bikers came into view. The crowd's reaction was immediate and mixed. Some people stiffened, their faces etched with worry. Others exchanged uneasy glances, whispering assumptions about the group. The bikers rode in a formation, their leather jackets gleaming under the sun, adorned with patches that bore symbols and slogans not easily deciphered. "Who are they?" Tess asked, her phone still capturing every moment. "They don't look friendly," Ed muttered, narrowing his eyes. The bikers slowed as they approached, their engines rumbling like a low growl. There were 5 of them, led by a tall man with a rugged face and sharp, piercing eyes. His name, Wes, was stitched onto his jacket. Behind him, Jet Kai Ford and Lee rode in synchronized precision. The crowd parted slightly, unsure of what to expect. The bikers parked their motorcycles near the edge of the square, dismounted, and began walking toward Cal. The tension in the air was palpable. "Are they here to cause trouble?" someone whispered. "They better not mess with him," Ed said, stepping closer. Cal, however, remained still, his salute unwavering. He didn't react to the bikers' arrival, his focus fixed firmly ahead. The bikers stopped a few feet away from Cal. For a moment, no one moved. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The square had fallen into a tense silence. All eyes were on the 5 bikers as they stood just feet away from Cal. their leather jackets and imposing presence starkly contrasting the solemn crowd gathered to honor Memorial Day. The faint growl of their motorcycles, though now idle, seemed to linger in the air like an unspoken threat. Wes, the leader, stepped forward. He was tall, with a weathered face that spoke of countless roads traveled and challenges faced. Piercing eyes scanned the scene before settling on Cal, who remained motionless, his salute unwavering. Behind Wes, his companions jet Kai forward, and Lee stood still, their postures relaxed but alert. The crowd buzzed with nervous whispers. "What are they doing here?" Tess murmured to Ed, her camera still trained on the scene. "Probably here to make trouble," Ed replied, his tone a mix of frustration and fear. Wes took another step closer, his boots crunching softly on the pavement. The tension in the square grew thicker. A woman in the crowd clutched her child's hand tightly, ready to pull him back at the first sign of danger. Finally, Wes spoke, his voice deep and steady. "Hey, Marine." Cal didn't respond. His focus remained locked on the flag, his posture as resolute as ever. Wes chuckled softly, a sound that did little to ease the unease in the square. "You've got some guts standing out here in this heat," he said, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. Ed stepped forward, a slight smirk on his face. "Bet you're making a statement, huh?" he said, his tone laced with mockery. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some people began to murmur, their voices growing louder. "Why isn't anyone doing anything?" one woman whispered. "Should we call the police?" another asked. Tess's live stream was flooded with comments, some supportive, others panicked. "They're going to hurt him," one viewer typed. "Stand your ground, Marine," another wrote. The bikers' presence was like a dark cloud over the square, their sheer numbers and confidence enough to intimidate even the most steadfast onlookers. Yet California remained unfazed. His hand stayed firmly at his brow, his body steady despite the growing strain in his injured leg. Kai, standing behind Wes, leaned toward him and muttered something under his breath. Wes nodded slightly before turning back to Cal. "Look, man," Wes said, his tone softening ever so slightly. "This thing you're doing, it's admirable, really. But you're going to hurt yourself standing here like this." Still, Cal didn't move. The crowd's unease deepened as Wes and his crew made no move to leave. Instead, they seemed to settle into their positions, as if they had no intention of backing down. Tess adjusted her phone, capturing every moment for her growing audience. "What's their deal?" someone whispered harshly. "Are they trying to intimidate him?" another murmured, their voice laced with both worry and indignation. Jet smirked again, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Cal. "Silent type, huh? Bet you think you're making a big statement out here." Still, Cal didn't react. His focus was unwavering, his body a testament to discipline and resolve. Ford, the biker with a build like a linebacker, took a step forward. His shadow stretched across the pavement, nearly reaching Cal's feet. "You know, it'd be a real shame if you ended up collapsing out here, old man," he said with a grin, though there was no malice in his tone. Just an odd mixture of curiosity and challenge. Wes held up a hand, silencing his companion. His gaze remained fixed on Cal. "Relax, Ford. He's not going to let us distract him," he said with a small chuckle. By now, the crowd had started to splinter. A few people too anxious to stay began to leave, shaking their heads and muttering about the bikers. Others, however, remained rooted in place, too drawn to the standoff to walk away. Tess's live stream comments exploded with speculation. "Why is no one stopping them?" one viewer demanded. "Maybe they're veterans too," another countered. Leah, standing next to Tess, frowned. "I don't think they're here to start a fight," she said hesitantly. Ed snorted. "Bikers like that. They're always looking for trouble." Just as the tension in the square reached a fever pitch, Wes moved again. This time he reached into his jacket. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone yelled, "He's got something!" A young boy clung to his mother, who hurriedly tried to shield him. Even Tess's hands trembled slightly as she kept her phone steady, but what Wes pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a neatly folded American flag. The air seemed to still as he unfurled it with a practiced precision, revealing the familiar stars and stripes. "What's he doing?" Tess whispered, her voice barely audible. Without a word, Wes stepped forward and planted the flag firmly into the ground next to Cal. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, he stood at attention and raised his hand in a salute, mirroring Cal's posture exactly. The crowd froze, their collective breath held in disbelief. Matt followed his leader's cue, moving to stand beside Wes. He too raised his hand in a solemn salute. One by one, the remaining bikers fell into line. Kai, Ford, and Lee took their places, their faces no longer marked with smirks, but with expressions of quiet respect. In that moment, the bikers' intimidating presence transformed into something entirely unexpected, a tribute. The transformation was so sudden that the crowd didn't know how to react. Just moments ago, the bikers had seemed like a threat, an unwelcome interruption to the solemnity of Memorial Day. Now they stood alongside Cal, their salutes as steadfast and reverent as his own. The scene was surreal. Wes, with the American flag firmly planted in the ground, held his salute with the precision of someone who had performed this act countless times. Beside him, Jet stood tall, his expression stripped of the mockery it had carried earlier. Kai, Ford, and Lee completed the line, their once imposing figures now symbols of respect and unity. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. "They're saluting him," someone said, almost disbelievingly. "Could they be veterans too?" another asked. Tessa's livestream comments flooded in. "This is incredible. I misjudged them. What an amazing gesture. Heroes recognize heroes." Meanwhile, Cal remained steady, his posture unchanged, but his eyes, which had been locked on the flag ahead, shifted slightly to the side. He saw them, these strangers who had turned what could have been a confrontation into an act of solidarity. A flicker of emotion crossed his face, but he quickly steadied himself, unwilling to let the moment break his resolve. Wes was the first to move. Licking his salute, he stepped closer to Cal, his boots scraping softly against the pavement. The crowd tensed again, unsure of what would happen next. "Marine," Wes said, his voice low but firm, "you're not alone today." He reached into his jacket pocket once more, but this time there were no gasps from the crowd. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a small pin of Marine Corps insignia. Without a word, he leaned forward and pinned it onto Cal's jacket, just below his medals. Cal's hand twitched ever so slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the gesture. Wes stepped back and resumed his salute. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the solemn exchange unfolded. Cal, despite his unflinching stance, felt the weight of Wes's gesture, a quiet but powerful acknowledgement of shared values. Jet, standing next to Wes, took a step forward next. From his saddlebag he pulled out a canteen of water. With deliberate care, he approached Cal, pausing to ensure he wasn't overstepping. "Sir," Jet said softly, his voice carrying a tone of respect that seemed out of place for someone dressed in leather and covered in tattoos. Without waiting for a response, Jet uncapped the canteen and held it to Cal's lips. The crowd gasped softly at the gesture, their collective apprehension beginning to dissolve into admiration. Cal hesitated briefly, but eventually took a small sip, enough to stave off the worst of the heat. "Thank you," Cal said, his voice hoarse but steady. It was the first word he had spoken since the bikers arrived. Jet nodded and stepped back into formation, his actions as deliberate as Wes's. The other bikers followed suit, each contributing to the tribute in their own way. Kai, tall and broad-shouldered, knelt down and carefully adjusted Cal's leg brace, ensuring it was secure. Ford produced a handheld fan from his jacket and began fanning Cal, the gentle breeze providing some relief from the oppressive heat. Meanwhile, Lee unfolded a compact umbrella, holding it high to shield Cal from the glaring sun. The crowd was transfixed. The same bikers who had seemed like a threat mere moments ago were now working together to support a man they'd never met before. Tessa's livestream comments flooded in with reactions of awe and praise. They're not just bikers, they're angels in disguise. This is what humanity should look like. I can't stop crying. Nearby, Ed wiped a hand across his face, his gruff demeanor softening. "Guess I was wrong about them," he muttered. Tess. Still filming, She simply nodded, too moved to speak. As the bikers continued their actions, the dynamic in the square shifted entirely. The tension that had hung in the air earlier was replaced by a palpable sense of unity. Even those who had been ready to call the police now stood in quiet reverence, their initial fears melting away. Wes broke his salute once more, this time turning to address the crowd. His voice carried a commanding presence that silenced the remaining murmurs. "For those of you wondering why we're here," he began, "let me make it clear. We're not here to intimidate anyone. We're here because we respect this man and what he stands for." He gestured toward Cal. "Every year, he comes out here and salutes in honor of those who gave everything for this country. That kind of dedication deserves more than just admiration. It deserves action." The crowd erupted into quiet applause, some even wiping away tears. Cal, though still holding his salute, allowed a small, grateful smile to cross his face. As Wes's words settled over the crowd, a sense of collective purpose began to take root. The bikers weren't just paying tribute. They were leading by example, showing that respect wasn't something merely spoken but demonstrated through action. One by one, members of the crowd began stepping forward, each finding a small way to contribute. Tess handed her phone to a friend and approached Cal with a damp cloth, offering to wipe his forehead. "You're incredible," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Maya, a young mother who had been standing near the back, encouraged her son to bring a small bouquet of flowers to Cal. The boy hesitated at first, intimidated by the imposing bikers. But when Jet gave him an encouraging nod, he mustered the courage to step forward. "Thank you for everything," the boy said softly, placing the flowers at Cal's feet. Cal finally broke his salute for a brief moment, lowering his hand to give the boy a small pat on the shoulder. "The honor is mine," he said, his voice filled with quiet strength. As the sun continued its relentless climb, the bikers adjusted their positions to ensure Cal remained as comfortable as possible. Lee shifted the umbrella to block the changing angle of the sun, while Ford kept the fan moving steadily. Jet refilled the canteen with water from his bike, ready to offer it again if needed. Wes stood like a sentinel beside the flag he had planted, his expression resolute. "We've got you, Marine," he said firmly. "We're not going anywhere." The crowd, once hesitant and wary, now stood in solidarity. People began forming a semicircle around the bikers and Cal, some holding small flags, others simply standing silently in respect. Even Ed, who had been skeptical from the start, joined the formation, his arms crossed but his face soft with emotion. Tess resumed her live stream, her voice steady now as she narrated the scene. "What started as a moment of uncertainty has turned into something extraordinary," she said. "These bikers have shown us all what it means to stand together no matter what." The standoff, once fueled by tension and misunderstanding, had transformed into a tableau of unity. When the clock struck the 4th hour, Cal finally lowered his salute. A collective exhale rippled through the crowd as they broke into applause. Cal turned to Wes, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know who you are," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "But today you've done more for me than words can ever express." Wes extended his hand, gripping Cal's firmly. "Name's Wes," he said simply, "and we're just men who understand what sacrifice means." The crowd erupted into cheers as Cal and the bikers shared a quiet moment of understanding. For that brief time, the divisions of the world outside the square seemed to melt away, replaced by a shared sense of purpose and respect. As the cheers slowly subsided, the crowd remained gathered, unwilling to let the moment end. Cal, still standing with his back straight despite the hours of strain, finally allowed himself to relax. He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the people who had come together in an unexpected show of solidarity. Wes gestured toward the flag he had planted, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This flag isn't just a symbol," he said, addressing the crowd. "It's a reminder of the sacrifices made by men and women like Cal. It's about more than patriotism. It's about gratitude." The crowd murmured in agreement, many nodding their heads as they reflected on the gravity of the moment. Maya stepped forward, her young son clutching her hand. "I think I speak for everyone here when I say thank you," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Not just to Cal, but to all of you," she added, gesturing toward the bikers. Jet, who had been refilling the canteen, glanced at Waze with a faint smile. "Guess we're not so scary after all," he muttered, drawing quiet laughter from the nearby crowd. Cal turned to address Wes and his crew, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know what brought you here today, but you've reminded me and everyone here that no one stands alone. Not on a day like this." Waze nodded, his expression serious. "We're here because we've seen what it means to lose brothers. We know what it's like to carry that weight." The mention of shared loss resonated deeply with Cal. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to lean slightly on his cane, his body finally giving way to the exhaustion of the day. Ford and Lee immediately stepped closer, steadying him without hesitation. "I'll never forget this," Cal said, his voice barely above a whisper. As Cal regained his composure, the crowd instinctively closed in, forming a protective circle around him and the bikers. The moment wasn't just about one man anymore. It had become a shared experience, a profound testament to the strength of community. Tess, still recording on her phone, turned the camera toward herself briefly. Her voice was steady, but full of emotion. "Today we've seen something truly remarkable," she said. Her words broadcast live to thousands of viewers. What began as a moment of tension turned into a powerful reminder of what it means to stand together. No matter who you are or where you come from, respect and kindness can bridge any divide. Maya stepped forward again, this time holding her son closer. "What you all did today," she said. "Addressing the bikers, it reminded us that heroes don't always look like we expect them to. Sometimes they wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles." Wis chuckled softly at the comment, but quickly grew serious again. "Heroes come in all forms," he said, "but the real heroes are the ones who gave everything. We're just here to honor that." The bikers began gathering their things, preparing to leave. Jet handed the canteen back to Cal, now half empty, but still cool. Howard folded the umbrella, while Lee gave a respectful nod to the older Marine. Cal took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the group. "You've done more than honor the fallen today," he said. "You've reminded us all that there's still good in the world." As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, the sound of engines roared back to life, echoing through the square. But this time, the noise didn't feel intrusive or intimidating. Instead, it carried a sense of purpose, like a parting salute. The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, a heartfelt expression of gratitude not just for Cal, but for everyone who had made the moment possible. Long after the bikers had ridden off, the square remained a place of quiet reflection. People lingered, exchanging stories and sharing their thoughts on what they had just witnessed. Ed, who had been one of the loudest skeptics earlier, approached Cal with an outstretched hand. "I misjudged them," he admitted, "and I misjudged you. What you're doing here, it matters more than words can say." Cal smiled, his grip firm as he shook Ed's hand. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about all of us, remembering, respecting, and standing together." As the crowd began to disperse, Tess turned her camera off, wiping a tear from her cheek. She knew this wasn't just a story for the day. It was a story that would resonate for years to come. And as the sun set on that unforgettable Memorial Day, the world felt just a little closer, united by the courage of one man and the unexpected compassion of a group of bikers who proved that kindness knows no boundaries. In moments like these, we're reminded that true strength isn't just about physical endurance. It's about the heart and the connections we build with one another. Today, Cal's unwavering salute and the bikers' unexpected actions showed us that even strangers can come together in the most profound ways to honor sacrifice and celebrate unity. At Heart Tales, we believe in the power of stories to inspire, heal, and bring people closer. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Did it remind you of someone in your life who embodies courage and compassion? Or maybe it gave you a new perspective on what it means to stand together. Share your reflections in the comments below. We can't wait to read them. And if you enjoyed this story, Please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness can bridge any divide. Don't forget to subscribe to Heart Tales for more heartfelt stories like this one, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and always remember, a little compassion can go a long way. See you in the next story.